Thelma Todd, the golden darling of 1930s American comedy. Audiences adored her for her delightfully ditzy roles as starlet whose beaming smile seemed to shine just as brightly as the stage lights that lit her face. But on a bitterly cold Sunday morning in 1935, Thelma was found dead inside her own Packard, parked in a closed garage. The official cause, carbon monoxide poisoning. But in Hollywood, is anything ever that simple? More than 90 years have passed, and Thelma Todd's death still remains a mystery with no clear answer. Was it a tragic accident, a deliberate decision, or a meticulously staged murder hidden beneath the fog of power, wealth, and long-buried secrets? Roland West, her lover, her director, and the last person to see her alive, kept silent for years. But near the end of his life, he whispered a single line, and everyone who heard it felt a chill run down their spine. But before we get to that haunting confession, let's rewind the clock to Hollywood, 1935, a place where every dazzling smile might just be a mask. Thelma Todd, the rose behind the glass. Born in 1906 in Massachusetts, Thelma Todd was never the typical Hollywood starlet of the 1930s. She didn't come from the bright lights of Broadway, nor did she start out as an unknown extra drifting around studio lots. She had been trained to become a Latin teacher, graduating with honors from a teaching college, only to stumble into show business by chance after winning the title of Miss Massachusetts. And yet, strangely enough, she seemed born for this world, with radiant beauty, a glowing smile, and a sparkle of mischief in her eyes. Thelma quickly caught the attention of silent film directors, then glided effortlessly into talkies as the film industry evolved. It wasn't long before audiences affectionately nicknamed her Hot Toddy, a bold comedienne, known for her charmingly ditzy roles in Horsefeather's Monkey Business and her many beloved pairings with the legendary Laurel and Hardy. But behind the spotlight was a fiercely ambitious woman, one who refused to follow the rules. Thelma longed to take control of her own career, a rare desire in a Hollywood dominated by studios that dictated everything from contracts to love lives. And ironically, it was love that seemed to wound her the most. She once married Pat DiCicco, a producer and power player rumored to have ties with the New York Mafia. That marriage quickly unraveled in violence. DiCicco once beat her so badly, he broke her teeth, sending her to the hospital. But in that era, scandals like this were swiftly swept away, handled discreetly by fixers hired by studios to protect the polished image of their stars. After the divorce, Thelma entered a fraught relationship with director Roland West, nearly 20 years her senior, and also her business partner in the venture known as Thelma Todd's Sidewalk Cafe. On one hand, Roland helped her chase her dreams. On the other, he controlled her private life with a jealous, possessive grip. Then came the whispers of a murky connection with Lucky Luciano, the infamous crime boss who had begun weaving his influence into Hollywood behind a mask of legitimacy. Nothing was ever confirmed, but their frequent appearances at private parties ignited months of gossip in the press. She was a rose, beautiful, magnetic, and dangerously intelligent. So intelligent, in fact, that men both adored her and feared her. But in a Hollywood where power changed hands behind closed doors, a woman who dared to shape her own fate wasn't seen as brave. She was seen as a threat. What Thelma didn't know was that every choice she made, every lover, every deal, every yes or no to the wrong offer, might have been a silent move in a game she never knew she was playing, one that led toward an ending she never saw coming. And then on a cold December morning in 1935, time seemed to freeze. But before silence filled that fume-choked garage, Thelma Todd had lived through a final stretch of chaos, strange phone calls from faceless voices, eyes watching her from the shadows, friends who once felt like safety now turning into burdens or worse, threats. The men who once swore they loved her, who saw her as theirs, seemed to be slipping out of control. And she, too independent, too famous, too bold to say yes in a world where every yes came with a price, started saying no. That's when the cracks began to show. A tangle of love and power. The tragic turning point. In Hollywood, sometimes you don't need a single tool to end a life. Sometimes all it takes is an embrace, a whispered word over cocktails, and a contract that never gets signed. For Thelma Todd, tragedy didn't come at the hands of a faceless killer. It came from the very men who once passed through her heart. By 1934, Thelma's career was reaching its peak. She had shed the image of the pretty face with lines and earned her place as a true comedienne, standing shoulder to shoulder with Laurel and Hardy and the Marx Brothers. But Thelma was never meant to recite lines written by others. She wanted to take the wheel of her own life. And the first step in that dream was a cafe. Thelma Todd's Sidewalk Cafe wasn't just a stylish beachfront restaurant, it was her declaration of independence. And the man quietly backing her, Roland West, a seasoned director and her lover. They were business partners, romantic partners, and entangled in a complicated bond that was never fully defined. Roland was divorced, but he never acknowledged Thelma publicly. To him, she was a muse, yes, alluring, but also a prized possession that needed to be tightly kept. The problem was, Thelma Todd was not the kind of woman who could be kept. She liked driving herself to parties, mingling across circles from actors and politicians to men with power in the shadows. She was clever, quick, and sometimes bolder than was safe. And that was something Roland couldn't stomach. He grew increasingly resentful as the cafe grew livelier than expected, as Thelma began signing deals behind his back, and as her independence became a thorn in his pride. And then there was Pat DeCicco, Thelma's ex-husband. He had once beaten her so badly she ended up in the hospital. But more dangerously, he had ties to Lucky Luciano, the mafia boss steadily threading his influence into Hollywood. When Luciano proposed turning the cafe's upstairs into a covert casino, Thelma flatly refused. Not out of morality, but out of clarity. She knew once you stepped into that world, there was no stepping back. She once confided in a friend, "If I let them in, I lose everything. My career, maybe even my life." By the end of 1935, Thelma began cutting those cords. She was preparing to end her business ties with Roland and take full control of the cafe. At the same time, she was readying legal action against DeCicco for abuse. Thelma was no longer afraid, but that very courage made the men around her feel dangerously threatened. Just 1 week before her death, Thelma told actress Zasu Pitts that she felt someone was watching her. She didn't know who, Roland, Pat, or someone else entirely. But one thing she was sure of: Roland doesn't love me anymore. He just hates that I stopped obeying. Around that time, tabloid whispers started hinting at ties between her and Luciano. No photos were ever published, but several reporters claimed their stories were blocked from above. A silencing that was so blatant, it chilled the bones. And then one foggy weekend night, Thelma quietly slipped away from a party and vanished. By morning, Hollywood awoke to find her name splashed across every front page for the last time. But was it truly a coincidence, or had someone quietly written her ending long ago? The death and the unanswered questions. Morning. December 16th, 1935. The sky above Pacific Palisades was cloaked in an oddly quiet shade of gray. A light mist still hung along the coast near Thelma Todd's cafe. As usual, her housekeeper began the morning routine, walking past the garage in the back. But that day, something made her stop, an acrid metallic scent, lingering in the cold air like the remnants of a fire that never had the chance to burn. The old iron door creaked open. And then, silence. Inside the closed-top Packard, Thelma Todd lay motionless in the front seat. Her coat still draped over her shoulders, her makeup untouched. But her face had turned a pale ashen gray. The engine was still running. She died of carbon monoxide poisoning. That was the official police conclusion. But from the very moment of discovery, nothing quite made sense. First, the location. Why was Thelma in Roland West's garage? It wasn't hers. It was behind the cafe part of the property where West, her former lover and a film director, lived upstairs. Their relationship had faded. Thelma had her own home, her own driver, her own keys. So why go around back alone in the dead of night instead of using the front door?
Her driver, Ernest Peters, stated he'd dropped her off around 2 a.m. after a party at screenwriter Stanley Lupino's home. He left her at the front of the cafe, but no one could confirm she ever went inside. The front door had been locked from within. As for the garage, Roland West said he locked it to keep strangers out. Then, how did Thelma get in? And if it had been locked, who locked it again from the outside? After she was already inside, there were no signs of forced entry. No one saw her with a key. And the back path to the garage was muddy and winding. Only someone who knew the place well could navigate it. Then came the forensics. Thelma had died around 4 to 5 a.m. hours after leaving the party. But her lungs showed barely any soot, unusual for deaths caused by car exhaust. Her blood alcohol level was low, even though she'd reportedly been drinking. And there was a small bruise near her nose entirely omitted from the official report. Her high heels were caked with mud. A strange detail. To reach the garage, she would have had to cross a soggy backyard, soaked from the rain the night before. A woman in a fine coat and heels trudging alone through mud on a freezing night. To sleep in a garage. Or had she never walked there at all? The deeper the investigation went, the more questions surfaced. Roland West. The only person with a key to that garage never called the police, despite Thelma being gone for over a day. He claimed he thought she had gone off somewhere. But for 36 hours, she didn't show up. No calls, no messages. The ex-lover wasn't worried, or had he already known? Years later, on his deathbed, Roland confessed something chilling to his close friend actor Chester Morris. "I locked the door from the outside. I didn't think she'd sneak in from the back to get into the garage. I just wanted to scare her a little. Just a little. But the price was everything." And if Roland was the first link in the chain, others may have been even more dangerous. Pat DeCicco. Thelma's ex-husband was rumored to be near the cafe that night. He had ties to Albert Anastasia, head of Murder, Inc., the mafia's hit. Pat had worked closely with Lucky Luciano, the building a shadow empire in Hollywood through underground casinos. Thelma had refused to be part of that. She once said, "If I let them in, I'll lose everything. My career and my life." Just days before she died, Thelma told actress Ida Lupino something that still haunts. "If I die suddenly, it won't be by my own hand. Someone will be arrested." But no one was. No charges. No serious interrogation. The file was closed quickly. Every trail quietly erased. In Hollywood's shadows, they called it a professional cleanup done by studio fixers who erased bloodstains with nothing but a signature and a silence. Thelma Todd was buried in a white dress, her face painted like an angel's. Her tombstone bears no cause of death, only her name, and a silence that has lasted nearly a century. Aftermath and legacy. The death of Thelma Todd didn't just end the life of a star. It cast a heavy silence over Hollywood, so heavy no one dared to break it. No one was arrested. No accusations made. No one held accountable. And then, like every other scandal in Tinseltown, everything was buried beneath the glittering stage lights. Roland West, the lover colleague, and the last known person to see her alive, vanished from public life. He never directed another film, never appeared at any film event again. In his final years, he lived quietly in a small house by the sea, turning down all interview requests.
Some said he couldn't sit through an entire screening. Just seeing a comedian's face under the spotlight was enough to make him walk out of the theater. Thelma Todd's Sidewalk Cafe, her bold symbol of independence in a man's world, never opened again. After her death, the cafe shut down permanently. Not long after it changed, owners changed names and slowly faded from memory, just like the woman who built it. No studio sent flowers to her funeral. No producer called for the case to be reopened. They had grown far too used to letting the curtain fall and walking away. As for her family, Thelma's mother, Alice, once hired a lawyer to challenge the accidental death conclusion. But no law firm dared take the case. When asked why, a close family friend simply said, "In Hollywood, no one wants to stand with the dead, especially when the other side is the studios and the mob." The name Thelma Todd fell into a quiet pocket of history. No awards tribute, no biopic, no memorial statue, only occasionally brought up in a tabloid as a tragic mishap, and then quickly closed again for lack of new evidence. And yet, strangely enough, Thelma never truly disappeared. Not from the screen, but from the whispers of urban legends, from true crime podcasts, from the pages of books titled Hollywood's Unsolved Deaths. She became a symbol for an entire generation of women who dared to reach for power only to be swallowed by the dark. Many modern filmmakers, from David Lynch to Quentin Tarantino, have referenced her directly or indirectly in noir-tinged films. Whether intentional or heartbreakingly coincidental, the image of a strong, beautiful woman trapped in a tight space under the city lights always seems to return like a ghost. And every time Hollywood dares to speak her name, whether a year later or 90 years on, people still ask, was Thelma Todd the victim of an accident? Or was she the first warning from a Hollywood where women were never allowed too much power? Her story may be closed on paper, but in the shadowy, forgotten hallways of Hollywood, her name is still whispered, like a quiet reminder. No indictment, no culprit, just a woman erased, while the machine kept spinning like nothing had ever happened. But has the truth been buried forever in that silent garage? Or has no one yet been brave enough to dig the right way? What do you think? Was it an accident, a desperate act, or a warning crafted down to the final breath? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because sometimes it's the questions from the audience that help uncover the fragments history wants to forget. And if you think Thelma Todd was the only case, get ready. In the upcoming episodes, we'll reveal deaths even darker, more twisted, and at times more chilling than this locked-door muse. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because when the spotlight fades, only you can help keep the truth alive.